The NBA draft is one of the most important dates for NBA teams, where teams actively search for generational and underrated talent to elevate their franchise. But in the shadows of the upcoming 2023 NBA draft lies a chilling truth regarding one of its top prospects. Meet Brandon Miller, the electrifying talent projected as the second overall pick in the 2023 NBA draft. There is no denying Miller's basketball ability and it factor. During his college campaign with Alabama, the 6'9" forward has shown ability to do basically everything on the floor.
Miller, come on. Oh no! Brandon Miller putting on a show here at the end of the half.
On-court performance aside, there is one thing about Miller that is not getting enough media attention for various potential reasons, and just a warning, it's quite disturbing.
Yesterday, Miller's name was mentioned in police testimony for allegedly bringing a gun to former teammate Darius Miles. That gun was later used in the murder of a 23-year-old woman last month.
Family has lost one of their loved ones that night. This whole situation is just really heartbreaking.
He showed up with the gun and then gunfire erupted.
You can clearly see that your career can change in a heartbeat.
So how on earth did this happen? How did the highest ranked freshman in college basketball involve himself in such a dark and disturbing incident? And why is this being kept under wraps by sports media and news sources alike? Welcome to Sportsphere. Let's dive into it. So what happened on the night of January 15th, 2023? According to law enforcement testimony, Brandon Miller would provide a gun to his former Alabama teammate Darius Miles that would later lead to the death of 23-year-old mother Jemiah Jonee Harris. Darius Miles, along with another Crimson Tide basketball teammate Michael Davis, would later be charged for capital murder over the death of Harris. But how did things unfold exactly? Before delving into those tragic details, it's important to understand who Brandon Miller is and what his upbringing was like. Born into an athletic family in Antioch, Tennessee, on November 22, 2002, it seemed like Brandon Miller was destined to play professional basketball. His father played college football at Alabama, and both of his siblings excelled in collegiate sports. Following in their footsteps, Miller swiftly emerged as a standout basketball player in his home state and began attracting attention for his exceptional basketball skills upon entering high school. While playing for Cane Ridge High School during his junior year, Miller garnered local attention with standout performances and impressive stats, averaging 23.3 points, 8 rebounds, 4.3 assists, 2.6 blocks, and 2.3 steals per game. These all-around statistics accurately represent his unique skill set, and he would later go on to win the Tennessee Gatorade Player of the Year award. And in his senior year, he would again be named as the Tennessee Gatorade Player of the Year, averaging over 24 points, over 8 rebounds, 4.3 assists, and 2.3 steals. This season also being named as Tennessee Mr. Basketball. By the time Miller left Cane Ridge High School and was ready to suit up for a college team, he was already deemed by scouts as a 5-star prospect alongside being a consensus top 15 prospect in the 2023 NBA draft by all scouting reports. His decision to commit to the Alabama Crimson Tide was an easy one that was made during his high school campaign due to his family's history. And Brandon Miller was soon ready to prove himself on the biggest stage of his life, playing for a top college basketball program and being the #1 option on the roster. From opening night onwards, Miller would showcase his elite skills night in and night out, displaying his prowess in almost every single regard. However, little did anyone anticipate that just over 2 months later, he would find himself in the midst of an incident that had the potential to profoundly alter not only his basketball career, but also his life, for better or for worse. In the first 10 games of the college season for Alabama, Miller would lead his team to a 9-1 record, with their only loss being against the UConn Huskies. He would lead his team in scoring as expected, averaging 18.5 points and 8.4 rebounds, also over 1 block per game. In these outings, Miller would prove to NBA scouts that he was just as good as expected, if not better, with his exceptional ability to knock down the three-pointer for his size, truly setting him apart from the rest of his draft class. In the first 10 games, he would make an average of over 3 threes per game and shoot over 43%, making him one of the best three-point shooters in his draft class despite standing at 6'9". Miller would continue to keep up his impressive three-point shooting among scoring and defending at all levels, and soon, on December 17, 2022, Miller would score a college career high of 36 points against Gonzaga, which included 6 three-pointers. Despite losing in the end, Brandon Miller at this point was seen as a 5-star prospect that was expected to go top 5 in the 2023 NBA draft. He would continue to help Alabama put wins on the board while putting up consistent performances both offensively and defensively. But soon, the much-dreaded January 15th would come. A Saturday night leading to the next morning where a forgettable series of events would unfold throughout the night, later resulting in the death of a 23-year-old mother. On this Saturday night, Brandon Miller and fellow teammates Darius Miles and Michael Davis, among others, would go to the Tuscaloosa Strip area in the evening to attend a nightclub, despite having a game the following night. And things would quickly take an unexpected turn. According to various sources, including one from Carol Robinson, who was directly inside the courtroom for the case testimony on February 21st. On January 14th, leading to the early morning of January 15th, Brandon Miller would drop teammates Darius Miles and Jaden Bradley off at the club, before Miller would go to eat at a nearby restaurant. Shortly after 1:30 a.m., a situation between two parties would occur, one being Alabama teammates Michael Davis and Darius Miles, and the other being 23-year-old Jemiah Jonay Harris, her boyfriend and her cousin. An encounter would unfold outside the club that would lead to devastating consequences. There was no reported altercation inside the club, but when Harris was eating outside of the club, Miles and Davis would dance around outside the Jeep that Harris was in, and Miles would apparently try to get Harris's number. This was followed by Harris's boyfriend telling him to move along, resulting in a verbal altercation between the two parties. Also, with alcohol potentially playing a factor, this would cause Darius Miles to get frustrated as they left the car. And this was when Miles would text Miller, asking to bring the gun that he had left in his Dodge Charger earlier. Miles' apparent reasoning was claiming that people were faking as to why he was requesting the firearm from Miller. A while after, Miller would arrive at Miles' and Davis' location in his Dodge Charger. When Miles and Davis entered his vehicle, Darius Miles would tell Michael Davis that the heat is in the hat, referring to the firearm, and also stating that there were bullets in the chamber. Davis acknowledged it, armed himself, then walked up to the passenger side of the car of the Jeep where Jemiah Jonay Harris was, and ended up pulling the trigger, which later led to her death. In retaliation, Harris's boyfriend would fire shots back at Michael Davis, with one bullet hitting his shoulder and another grazing him on the thigh, with 2 bullets also hitting Miller's vehicle. Although there were allegations that there was an intentional blockage created by Miller's Dodge Charger and other Alabama teammate Jaden Bradley's Challenger, these remained accusations, and there is no evidence that this was intentional. Despite Miller's role in the ultimate tragic death of Harris, prosecutors treated both Miller and Bradley more as witnesses rather than suspects, according to Alabama public safety reporter Carol Robinson. Robinson further stated that while Miller technically delivered the murder weapon to the accused, prosecutors primarily focused on establishing knowledge and intent. Ultimately, they concluded that Miller had no awareness of the weapon's intended use, leading to the decision not to press charges against him or Bradley. This was later confirmed by Alabama District Attorney Paula Whitney, who reluctantly revealed that there is nothing they can charge Miller with. As per the testimony of the Tuscaloosa police, although Miles and Davis initially provided false information to the officers regarding the incident, Miller's recollection of the shooting closely matched the evidence captured in video footage, including footage of Miller's dashcam, as well as statements from other witnesses. While Brandon Miller and Jaden Bradley remain innocent as of now, both Darius Miles and Michael Davis face capital murder charges, with Miles going on record to admitting his involvement but revealed that Michael Davis was the one who pulled the final trigger. This case will now be presented to the grand jury, and the 2 former Alabama Crimson Tide players await their fate. Despite various claims by police testimony detailing Miller's involvements, Miller's attorney claims Miller never saw or handled the gun, and denied all knowledge of a crime committed on the behalf of Miller. His attorney claimed that he never touched the gun, was not involved in its exchange to Mr. Davis in any way, and never knew that illegal activity involving the gun would occur. Although police allegedly claim Miller's and Bradley's vehicles blocked the Jeep where Harris was later found dead, Miller's attorney denies this, stating that Miller had already parked on a street when the Jeep arrived. After gathering all the evidence and hearing witnesses speak out, Brandon Miller's name is cleared in the court of law, but then the question of morality pops up and becomes one worthy of discussion. Although some people claim that a suspension was a necessary consequence for Miller's involvement, Alabama and the NCAA had other ideas in mind. To the surprise of many, Miller did not end up receiving a single game suspension by the NCAA, nor Alabama Crimson Tide, no fines, nothing. Some may say that since he was not punished by the court of law, he shouldn't be punished at all. Well, the reality is that players get fined by their own team for missing practice, or are suspended for minor locker room or outside locker room issues more often than we think. Although he did not commit a crime on paper, being as involved as bringing a weapon that later became a murder weapon onto a scene, with or without knowledge of intent, is still not something to be taken lightly. And the fact that Alabama nor the NCAA gave him a punishment of any kind brings up the suspicion that they are more than likely playing favorites, especially considering Brandon Miller has been a top-ranked freshman in the NCAA for the majority of the season. This situation also brings comparisons to the Ja Morant situation that happened recently. In the case of Ja Morant, as we know, he received an 8-game suspension for flaunting a firearm on Instagram, also without being charged of any crimes. While Miller's involvement in a capital murder case did not result in a suspension at all. The major differences between the two situations was that Ja had already entered the biggest basketball stage in the world, which resulted in immediate media scrutiny. In addition to Ja adding on to a string of recent alleged violent incidents leading up to the infamous Instagram Live. This compelled the Memphis Grizzlies, the NBA, and even Ja Morant and his team to take quick action to rectify the situation. After being suspended for 8 games, he was later suspended again indefinitely after a second gun incident, with this one being a 25-game suspension by the NBA. Rather than delve into conspiracies as to why the NCAA and Alabama went so soft on Miller, the reality is that the amount of attention on a certain headline will affect how the party seemingly responsible may choose to react to the situation. For example, if the Brandon Miller story would blow up and be put on the front page of Google and Twitter, Alabama and the NCAA would feel more pressure to punish Miller just to cater to public opinion and make as few people angry as possible. This is because public opinion often involves stakeholders whose outrage can affect the organization financially. We created a poll on our YouTube community, asking whether viewers had heard about Brandon Miller and his potential involvement in supplying a murder weapon earlier in the year. And results showed that just over 40% of people had heard of the headline, while around 60% had not. In addition, the truth is that many people that had not heard of the situation would not have voted at all, which would in turn exaggerate these numbers. Regardless, with the 2023 NBA draft coming up, no matter which NBA team Miller ends up with, they will greatly benefit from his all-around skill set and elite shooting. But the question of if teams should have any off-the-court concerns with Miller becomes an obvious one. And after doing hours of research, looking through articles and testimony, we have come to the conclusion that teams should not be all that concerned. Although Miller did show signs of further questionable behavior, especially with this pre-game introduction on the February 23rd game, he has not had a concerning history of any violence, substance consumption, or affiliation with the wrong people. So this seems like just an isolated incident of being in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people, which hopefully Miller will learn from. The February 23rd game with the pat-down introduction was the same game that opposition fans were doing some seemingly hard-hitting chants. But this did not faze Miller, and this game actually turned out to be the best game of Brandon Miller's season, if not entire career, scoring 41 points in an overtime victory against South Carolina, especially considering he scored a ridiculous 41 out of 78 Alabama points, not to mention also scoring the game winner, made it that much more impressive. Just to clarify, this is not a slander video on Miller's name. Its intention was to bring up a serious incident involving a top prospect that has not been covered enough in the media, which the audience may be able to learn a thing or two about. Not only can it serve as a reminder to avoid certain situations, but also help viewers understand the power of the media and how it can sway decision-making by organizations. As for the tragic death of Jemiah Jonah Harris, we send our deepest condolences to her family, and we'll have the GoFundMe link in the description. Let's see if we can get to $30,000 by the end of the month. Anyways, thanks for watching SportSphere. Please like the video if you learned something today, and we'll see you in the next video.